In the first part of this series, we have deployed Traefik as a Docker container, then attached a file to configure it. Even though it contained a few lines of code, but using that we were able to expose the dashboard and view the logs. We will be using this setup to move on to the next step, which is to generate a valid SSL certificate for our domain, and then use it for all of our local services. If you have not watched that part yet, I would highly recommend you watching that first. You can find the link in the top right corner, and I will also add it in the description below. Once you have your setup ready up to this point, we can move on to the next step, which is generating a valid SSL certificate using Let's Encrypt. But to do that, there are a few different steps that we need to configure. Even though it might look complex, do not worry. We will go step by step and understand every part of it. This video is going to be a little longer, but by the end, you will have a valid SSL certificate ready to be used by your local services. Now, before we start, I hope you have a valid domain ready for this setup. If you do not have one yet, you can purchase one from any domain provider. And once you have purchased one, just link it to your Cloudflare account. Then from there, we will do everything together. So let's open VS Code and continue with our setup. First of all, let's bring the Traefik container down, because we do not want any of our configurations to take effect unless everything is completed. I will also clear the terminal. Now let's move on to our first step, which is to configure the certificate resolvers. This section allows Traefik to automatically verify our domain from Cloudflare, then obtain trusted SSL certificates from Let's Encrypt. Similarly, while renewing the certificate, Traefik will use this configuration. So be a little careful while configuring this part. In the traefik.yml file, define a section for certificate resolvers. Make sure the R is in uppercase, and then below that mention the provider name. In our case, it will be Cloudflare. Traefik also supports many other providers. If you need that list, you can find it on Traefik's official website. Now, under Providers, mention Acme, and inside that, we need to provide the details for our Cloudflare account. The first thing that we need to provide is the Cloudflare account email. You can directly mention it here, but I do not prefer that. Your email can get pushed to your repository by mistake. And also, apart from that, I usually reuse this Docker Compose file and the configuration file for different setups as well. So it's better to pass it on as a variable. So let me comment this out. And then next to our Docker Compose file, let me create a new file and name it .env. Here we can provide all of our sensitive information like our Cloudflare credentials. And then we will add this file to our gitignore file so that it won't get pushed to any repository. Let's define a variable, cf_API email, and assign the email address. Now we cannot directly refer to this variable from the traefik.yml file, but we can do that in the Docker Compose file. So let me show you how can we add configurations directly from inside the Docker Compose file. Let's add a command section here. Now to add the email, first go back to our traefik.yml file. Uncomment the email so the hashtag symbol does not get copied. Copy the entire certificates resolvers section, and then we can comment the email again. Now let's head back to our Docker Compose file and paste it under the command section. Here, each command should start with 2 dashes, followed by the configuration hierarchy, which is represented using dots. So similarly, let's format this part as well. Make sure to change the R to lowercase. Then assign the email using the variable here, which we have defined in the .env file. This will inject the email value for the certificate resolver into the Traefik container at runtime. And using that, Traefik should be able to verify the ownership of our domain. But along with the email, Traefik will also require an API token. So just like the email, we can go back to our env file and add a new variable, cf_DNS API token. Later, when we will be configuring Cloudflare, we will copy our token here. For now, let me copy this variable name and let's head back to our Docker Compose file. But for the token, instead of using command section, we can simply add an environment section and pass our environment variable inside that. Just make sure, if you're using Cloudflare like me, the variable name should be the same. If you are using any other provider, you will find the details on Traefik's documentation. That is all we need to add in the environment section. So let me move this above. Let's do the same for the command as well. We will not need to make any changes in these for the rest of the setup. Now, with these credentials, when Traefik generates a valid certificate, we also need to store it. If you're planning to make this setup reusable across multiple environments, then you should set this storage location using a variable in the env file. Just like how we have our Cloudflare credentials, we can define our volume path here. So let's call our variable Docker volume path. And for the value, you might be having a specific location where you store your Docker volumes. You can add that path here. I will just create a separate directory for this setup where we will store all of our Docker volumes. And set the value for our variable to this location. I also want a subdirectory for Traefik. So let me also create that subdirectory here. Now let's create the file where Traefik will store the certificate. Just open this directory in the terminal and create a file acme.json. Then set its permission to 600 so that it's only accessible by its owner. This step is important, or else Traefik will keep throwing error once you will deploy it. Now let's head back to our Docker Compose file and add a new entry under the volume section. Refer the variable, then the file name on the host side. And on the container side, we need to map it to var/Traefik, then certificate/acme.json. Also copy this path to the traefik.yml file, and just below the email, mention storage, then paste it here. That should allow Traefik to store the certificate directly to this file. Now we need to add the CA server. You can copy these lines from my GitHub repo, but understand when to use which one before you deploy Traefik. You can see the first one is commented, which is the default production server. And currently we are using the second one, which is for staging. Because if we did any mistake or if the setup is not valid, you can get blocked by the server, sometimes for a really long time. So it is always recommended to use the staging server while you are setting things up. And once everything is working as expected, we can switch to the production server. Now let's configure Let's Encrypt to perform the domain validation using DNS challenge. Simply mention DNS challenge like this. And below that, set the provider to Cloudflare. We also need to mention the resolvers. And here, we can add the Cloudflare's DNS server addresses and ports. That should be everything we need for certificate resolvers. But while generating the certificate, if you still face any issue, then let me know in the comments section, or you can share it directly in our Discord server. We will definitely help you out. Now let's move on to the next step, which is Entrypoints. That is how Traefik will handle and manage the requests before they reach out to any other services. But first, let's go to our Docker Compose file. And here we need to expose port 80 and port 443. So that all incoming HTTP and HTTPS requests to the server is routed directly to the Traefik container. Now we have to configure Traefik to use these entry points. For that, let's go back to our traefik.yml file, and here let's define a section for entry points. Inside this section, we need to define each entry point along with their addresses. Let's call the first one web and set the address to port 80. Make sure you include the colon before the port number. Then also add another one. We can call it web secure, and for this we can set the address to port 443. Later, when we configure routers, we will reference these names, web and web secure, to tell Traefik which entry point should be used by a specific service. If you want to automatically redirect any traffic coming to web via HTTP to use the web secure endpoint, then we need to add a HTTP section inside our web entry point. And below that, mention redirections. Here, define entry point and set the to value to web secure. We also need to set the scheme to HTTPS. Now, any request coming in on port 80 will automatically be redirected to port 443. But before we use these entry points or try to generate the certificate, we have another step to configure. That is providers. Providers allow Traefik to discover other services, like another Docker container, or some address in the network like our Proxmox server. We can use different kinds of providers with Traefik. But as of now, we will only use the Docker provider. To do that, Traefik will need access to the host Docker socket. So let's go back to the Docker Compose file, and under Volumes, add a new entry. Map the Docker socket from the host to the container. We also need to configure it in the traefik.yml file. Here, add another section for providers, and inside that mention the Docker provider. Then we need to define endpoint and pass the value as a string. It will start with Unix followed by /. Then from the Docker Compose file, copy the Docker socket path and paste it here. Make sure there are 3 slashes before var. If we use this configuration for provider, by default Traefik will expose all Docker containers, which we do not want, so we will also set expose by default to false. That is the configuration we need in the traefik.yml file. Now let's decide a domain for our internal services and also configure Cloudflare. As domain will not be the same for different setups, I prefer adding it in the .env file. For the domain, we will have the parent domain that is our main website, and we will use a subdomain of that, which we will use for all of our local services. I will call it dev. You can call it anything, just make sure wherever I mention dev, you need to refer to your subdomain. So now let's log into our Cloudflare account and open the DNS records page. Here, we need to add a new record, and make sure the record type is a type. In the name field, add an asterisk, then a dot, followed by your subdomain. Also set the IPv4 address to our Docker host local IP. You can also see what this does from here. All requests that ends with our domain, which also includes our subdomain, will be redirected to the Traefik host IP. But this will work only from inside your local network because that is where the Docker host is available. Before you save it, make sure to turn off the proxy option, and then we can click on Save. This will add the record to our Cloudflare DNS records list. As I'm already logged into Cloudflare, let me also get the email and API token as well. We can get those details from the profile page. The email is here itself. Let me copy it to our env file. And for the API token, let's go to API tokens page. We will create a new token for Traefik. You can see we already have a token here. If you have watched my video on Cloudflare Tunnel and set that up, you might also have this. Or else, this might be empty for you. Anyway, we will not use that as we are creating a new one. We can simply click on Create Token and use the Edit Zone DNS template. Here, make sure your selected options are same as mine, and only just for this field, select your domain. Then we can click on Continue to Summary. Once we are on this page, click on Create Token. Remember, this token will be visible only once, and if you lose it, you need to recreate it again. Also, make sure you do not share this token with anyone. Let me copy this to our env file. And with that, we have all the details we will need for configuring Traefik. So let's close this file. Now, there is only one thing that is remaining. That is configuring the Traefik container with Docker labels. So let's open our Docker Compose file and add a labels section. Docker labels play a very crucial role when it comes to configuring Traefik with a Docker provider. Using labels, you can set the configuration for Traefik itself. And you will also need it to configure the routes and services for other Docker services. So first, let's see what labels we need to configure Traefik. As of now, we have not provided the domain anywhere for which we want to generate the SSL certificate. To do that, we need to add a new entry here. And the label should be traefik.http.routers, then again mention .traefik, followed by .tls.domains. Here we need to specify an index as 0. And at last, add .main and then set the value of this label to the full domain name, starting with the subdomain, then the main domain. Also copy this label again and modify the word main with the word sans. For this value, place your cursor at the beginning of the domain, then add an asterisk and a dot. Now let's understand what these labels does. The main label tells Traefik to generate a certificate for the primary domain, and the sans label includes any additional domains in the same certificate. So what we are doing here is adding a wildcard certificate. This will allow us to use this domain where the asterisk can have any value, but it should end with our main domain. Here in the labels you can see, we have also added an index for domains. That is because it is an array, and you can add multiple domains with different indexes in case you need for your setup. Then we have to configure Traefik to use our certificate resolver, which we have defined in our configuration file. For that, copy everything up to TLS. Add .cert resolver at the end. And for the value, set it to Cloudflare. These labels is all we need for configuring the certificate resolver. Now let's add another entry and paste the same label, which we have previously copied. This time just replace TLS with service. And using this, we want to expose our Traefik's internal API and the dashboard. So set its value to API at internal. These labels are all we need for configuring the Traefik container itself. But to expose the dashboard, we will need to use some additional labels. And let's try to understand these really well, because these labels will be required while configuring other Docker services. So let's add a new entry, Traefik.enable, and set its value to true. This will allow Traefik to read the Docker labels from this container. Without this, Traefik won't apply any configuration from Docker labels. We can use this to enable or disable Traefik on a container. Now let's add another entry. And here also we need the same label up to TLS. You can simply copy-paste it and set its value to true. This will now allow HTTPS traffic on this router. But along with that, we will need another label for the HTTPS entry point. So copy this label up to Traefik and add entry points in the end. Then set its value to web secure. If you remember, we have added it in our configuration file. Now let's define the port where the dashboard is exposed. So add another entry and paste the copied label. Replace routers with services. And at the end mention load balancer.server.port and set the value to 8080. Now we can comment out this port as we will be able to access it over the domain. Now let's add a new entry and paste the same label again, and at last mention rule. This time we will define the domain where the Traefik dashboard will be accessible. Traefik expects this value as host, followed by a pair of parentheses. And inside that, the domain should be provided with a pair of backticks. Let's copy our domain pattern from sans value and paste it here. Now we can replace the asterisk with any domain you want your Traefik instance to be accessible on. I will call mine Traefik itself. And that should be everything we require to generate the SSL certificate. But before we test it, make sure that we are using the Staging CA server. When we will deploy the Traefik container, the certificate details will be stored inside this ACME file. So let's keep this file open and move on to the terminal. This terminal is pointing to Docker volume directory. We do not need that, so let me close it. This is the terminal where our Docker Compose file exists. So we can run the Docker Compose up-d command here. But wait, I already tried this while recording, and there was one error, which was caused by a small mistake. And when I checked the container logs, it was showing an error in our Docker Compose file, where we have added a command to pass the email. So when I tried to debug this issue, I found out that I have missed out the 2 dashes which we need to add before every command. When we are working with so many files, and there are so many things to configure, there is a chance that mistakes can happen. So always use the staging server unless you are able to generate the SSL certificate. Once that is working, only then switch to the prod server. Now that I have added the 2 dashes, let's open in the ACME file again and redeploy the container. You will see that our Cloudflare account details have been populated in the ACME file. But as of now, the certificate section is still null. In case if these details are not showing up, that means there might be some issue with your Cloudflare credentials, or the ACME file mapping is not correct. Otherwise, if these details are populating in your file, then the checking DNS record propagation step is in progress. You can verify that by going back to the Cloudflare DNS records page, and then refresh it. You should be able to see 2 TXT records has been added for the ACME challenge. And these records are only valid for 2 minutes, and after that they will be removed. You can also check this from the container logs. Here, the last log updated was about checking the DNS record propagation. We need to wait for some time, usually 1 or 2 minutes, for the certificate to be generated. When the process is successful, it will be added to the certificate section. Then Traefik will also remove the TXT records from Cloudflare. Sometimes, if your attempt to generate the certificate was unsuccessful, and Traefik was not able to remove the records, then you can see multiple Acme challenge records getting stuck here. If that happens, you can remove them manually. Now that we have our certificate, let's check if the Staging SSL certificate is working. For that, open a private browser window. Because browsers cache certificates, and later when we will switch to Production CA server, the browser will keep showing up the staging certificate. So make sure to only use a private window when working with the staging process. To verify the certificate, we need to visit the domain we have set up for Traefik. As it is a staging certificate, we will get a warning page. This page can differ for each browser, but you might have already worked with this if you have ever handled a self-signed certificate before. Click on Advanced and proceed. You should be able to access the Traefik dashboard through this domain. And as we have commented the lines for exposing the dashboard ports, it is no longer accessible from the IP address and port number. So now that we are able to access the Traefik dashboard over this domain, it means we have a working staging certificate. If we check the SSL certificate, you will see that it was issued by Let's Encrypt staging server. That means all of our configurations are valid, and we should be able to generate a certificate from Production CA server. So let's head back to VS Code, and before we modify anything, let's bring the container down. Now open the traefik.yml file and modify the CA server by switching it from staging to production. Also, from my own experience, I like to clear the Acme file. Now let's bring the container up again. Just like before, the Acme file will start populating. But this time it is using the URI from Production CA server. Similarly, you can verify the Cloudflare DNS records. 2 Acme challenge records has been added again. You can also check the logs if it's waiting for the DNS propagation. And once the certificate is generated, we can open a new browser window. I am using a normal tab, but you can use a private window unless you are confirmed that the certificate is valid. And make sure to use a new session each time. Let's open the domain for our Traefik dashboard. We are able to access it, and this time we have a secure symbol for our domain, which means we have issued a valid SSL certificate, and it is working. If we check the details, you will see it is a valid certificate issued by Let's Encrypt, and also it has an expiry date. Don't worry, Traefik will automatically update it before expiry. So this is how we can issue a valid SSL certificate from Let's Encrypt for all of our local services. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section regarding this process. In case if you are facing any issues, you can also mention it in the comments, or you can join my Discord server and bring it up there. You will find all these codes on my GitHub repository as well. Now that you have issued a valid SSL certificate, you will need to understand how to exactly use it. So you can watch this next video to learn the different ways to set up Traefik routes for our local network. But before you leave, if this video really helped you out, then don't forget to like and share this video. You can also leave a comment. I personally read and reply to all of them. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.